Are we lost? Are we not? Are we real? Are we turning to dust? Do you feel what I feel? Have we changed so damn much? Can we heal?
Good morning everyone. It's your girl Tina and welcome to our channel, The Long's Life After Kids. So before I get started, as usual, if you have not subscribed to our channel, go ahead and do so. So, as I have been going over for the last few days, how I ended up, my journey of how I ended up in Oklahoma City. How I left that first marriage. I got married when I was 18 years old. I was pregnant with my first son and got married to his father, and then on from there ended up with 6 children from that marriage. But in light of a lot of the situations that's going on with men cheating, women cheating, instead of me speaking on someone else's marriage, I decided to speak on my ex-husband and how I ended up getting out of that marriage. So that's kind of how I started on this journey. And so I think I left off from the last video where I had given birth to Elijah, and that's our last son with my ex-husband. It was too early. My water had been seeping out. Of course, we didn't know that's what it was, but I had given birth to him. It was way too early. And if you remember, I had given birth to him after I got into this huge argument with the children's father, my ex-husband, out at the hospital. And I was supposed to be calling the nurse in. Every 4 hours, they would give me medication to stop my contractions. And I had to call them in like clockwork. And because we were arguing in the hospital room, I didn't buzz them in time. And it wasn't until our 5-year-old son, Daniel, told him, look, you see, she don't want you in this hospital room. Why don't you just go ahead and leave? And that's how he ended up leaving out of the room. So I called my mom, called the church and had them tell my mom to come back out to the hospital because I needed a support person to go in with me when I was having a cesarean. If you know anything about when a woman has a C-section, if they have to put you to sleep, now this was back in the day, if they have to put you to sleep, you couldn't be in the room. No one could be in the room with her. And I know that because Joshua, my first son, was a C-section, and they had to put me to sleep with him and no one could be in the room. But by the time I had BJ, a C-section, I was awake with him, and they allowed my ex-husband to be in the room, who was my husband at the time, to be in the delivery room with us. And then when we got to Elijah, I was able to be awake. And because I had gotten into an argument with him, I didn't want him in the delivery room with me because he had stressed me out enough. I felt that, it was just going to be too stressful. It was already a stressful situation. I was already having him too early. I just didn't want any more stress. So that's why I elected for my mom to come in with me. And then, so they deliver him. And when they deliver him, he's blue. As I said in the last video, you couldn't hear a pin drop in that room before they delivered him. And then my mom said when they pulled him out, he was blue. And so all you could hear at that point was me asking, is my baby breathing? Is my baby breathing? And my mom said that the doctor looked at her and she looked at him, because of course Elijah was blue and was not breathing at that point. But then by a miracle, you hear a whimper. And then the doctor says, yes, Bettina, your baby is breathing. But I didn't even get a chance to see him because they had to rush him out to the NICU. And so, they, clean me up, do whatever they can for me. And I go into recovery. And then from there back to my room as we, have to wait patiently to hear from the doctor what's going on with my baby. And so by this time, I go ahead and tell my mom to go ahead and call his father, because at the end of the day, he is and was his dad. So I told her, you can go ahead and let him know that I've delivered the baby. So, of course, he comes out with one of his brothers. And, it's just total silence in the room while we wait to hear. And finally, the specialist that they had brought in for him came to the room. And she said, Miss Bell, I'm going to be honest. That's one very sick little boy. It's going to be a miracle if he makes it the first 24 hours of his life. He was a meconium baby. Meconium babies are babies that swallow their bowel movements right before they're born. He had pneumonia because, remember, my water was seeping out. And because my water had been seeping out, it had got into his bloodstream and it caused E. coli. And of course, I didn't know what E. coli was at the time, but I do know from a health scare years ago where E. coli had got into some ground beef, it was killing people. And so it was very dangerous for it to be in his system. And he weighed 5 pounds and 15 ounces, but he had pneumonia. He was a meconium baby, and E. coli had seeped into his bloodstream. So he was very sick, and they were not expecting him to make it the first 24 hours. So they said, we don't have the equipment that we need here. I was at Methodist South at the time. They didn't have the equipment that they needed. So that meant they had to take my baby by ambulance to I believe it was the Methodist out in Germantown, because they did have the equipment. And so they said, we'll bring him in so you can say goodbye. So that meant, not only was I not going to get to hold him, I was not going to be in the same hospital that he was in. So that was devastating to hear as well. So they brought him in, and, we were able to say goodbye to him and praying that, he would make it through the night. And so they took him on. And so, of course, now I'm in the hospital, they leave and I'm in the hospital and I start clotting. And so it was some of the craziest stuff I had ever seen in my life. The doctor was coming in and he was just pulling out, blood clots. He was just pulling them out. They were, some were the size of a grapefruit that he was just pulling them out, trying to get me to stop clotting. And to the point where they had to give me a transfusion, a blood transfusion. And of course, I was afraid to get that because, of course, now HIV, AIDS is running rampant. And you hear the stories about the tainted blood. And so I was afraid to even get the blood transfusion. And, they had to come in and talk to me and assure me that they had tested this blood that they were going to give me, and that I really needed this transfusion or I wasn't going to make it. And so, of course, I ended up saying yes. And then in the meantime, I'm getting reports on my son, and he needed blood transfusions. And so finally they get the clotting to stop on me. And then, I would later be able to, he would release me from the hospital. Well, my mom had to work. My dad was at work. And so, the kid's father would come in town. So I had him to take me to go visit my baby in the hospital, who made it the first 24 hours. And so my mom calls him the miracle child. Because of course, remember, they said it was going to be a miracle if he made it the first 24 hours. And so I go to visit him, and I know he had taken that girl, to see my baby, because of the way the nurses and staff was reacting. Oh, this is his mom. So that just let me know I didn't even have the energy to focus on that. I didn't care. My main concern was my son. So I visit him and I go back home. And so in the meantime, I'm talking to my friend in Oklahoma City. I got to get out of here because one of us is going to end up dead. And I'm going to make darn sure it's not me. That's just how I was talking and how I felt in my spirit, that I got to get out of this situation before it just totally gets too out of hand, where one of us ends up dead and the other one ends up in jail, and our children have no one. So finally, the hospital calls me and asks me, do you want to pick up a little boy? When I tell y'all, I was shouting all over the place, because it was 11 days later that I was walking out the hospital with Elijah, not months, like you hear with most stories where children, come into this world in the situation that he came into. It was 11 days later that they called me and asked me, did I want to come pick up my son? And, I go to pick him up. And at this point, I'm still trying to get to Oklahoma. I'm still calling Reverend. I want to go to Oklahoma. He's still saying, I just don't know. So finally, I get all the children dressed. I have Elijah. I get all the children dressed, and I go over to the church to talk to my pastor about going to Oklahoma City. Well, when I get there, his mom lived across the street in the apartments, Lamorne Gardens. She lived across the street from the church. Well, when we get there, the children see his semi truck outside. So mind you, they hadn't seen him in weeks. He ain't worried about these kids, ain't called other than when I asked him to take me to go see Elijah. They ain't heard from him. So now they want to see their dad. So I text them to go see their dad. I knocks on the door. His mom opens the door, and the first thing she yells, because he was upstairs, Junior, your wife down here, and I don't want no nonsense in my house. And she leaves. And I look, and who did I see in the kitchen? The girl. So she leaves out and leaves me there. So I step in and I turn to Daniel. Oh, that was in my house. Daniel started laughing and said, yeah, that's her. So I goes in the kitchen, because she in the kitchen like she lives there, washing off chicken, like she at home, she getting ready to cook dinner. So she has the chicken in this aluminum pan, washing it off. So I hit the bottom of the pan, and chicken and water went everywhere. And I asked her, oh, are you that was in the home, in my home, in front of my children? You need to ask your husband. I said, oh, don't worry. When he get down here, I'm going to ask him, and I'm going to deal with him when he gets down here. But right now, I'm talking to you. Were you in my home over my children? She started talking slick. So I started pushing her. Who you think you're talking to? So she wasn't doing anything. So finally he comes down and steps in between us. And when I say this fool gonna introduce, and I think her name was Eugenia. I think that's what her name was. But I call her Miss Virginia because that's where she was from. So he says, Tina, this is my friend Eugenia. Eugenia, this my wife Tina. Well, at the time, I didn't have guns or anything like that to protect myself. I carried box cutters in the back in the day, because of course, you know, I was a stay-at-home mom. He was on the road, so I would have carried box cutters to protect myself and my children. When this fool introduced us, I clicked. I snapped. That stuff that you watch on TV, snap, that stuff for real. I snapped. And I came out of my coat pocket with that box cutter, and I just start swinging. I start swinging, just swinging at him, not her, because at this point, I'm like, okay, this ain't even about her. This is about him. This is about him and him thinking he could just do whatever the hell he wants to do. So I'm just swinging. So of course he takes the box cutter from me. So in the meantime, we arguing. And so I try to get the children and leave. So now at this point, he gonna tell me, no, you going to jail. You're going to jail. You come up in here starting stuff, you're going to jail. Oh, I come up in here starting stuff, and I'm going to jail. Well, I had been telling his grandmother, who I'm close to right to this day. She's like grandma to me, which is his mom's mom. I had been telling grandma, she's allowing him to bring this girl, this woman up in her house like she the wife. Grandma didn't believe that she would do something like that. So what do? I calls grandma long distance on her phone and said, Grandma, I'm right here in her house right now. And this girl up in here frying chicken like she live here. Grandma got afraid. She said, oh Lord, Tina, trouble is so easy to get into, but it's so hard to get out of. Just get the kids and leave. I said, Grandma, I'm trying, but he won't give me the kids, talking about I'm going to jail today. She said, Tina, let me talk to Junior. Give him the phone. So I had the phone, her house phone. So I took the receiver of the phone and I said, bam, right smack dab in the middle of his forehead, and said, yo, grandma want to talk to you. And I threw the phone to him. And I later told my sister, yeah, I gave that wake-up call. And so she tries to get him to give me the kids. But grandma, she going to jail. She going to jail. So, of course, with all the commotion, the neighbors called the police. So by this time, the police gets there. They give the police the box cutter I had. So the police asked, okay, what happened? So they start with her. So they sticking to this story. Well, I'm a friend of his mom, and I saw that he had all his children with him, and he needed help on the road with his children. So I was just trying to help him with his kids. But I want to press charges because she put her hands on me. So then they went to him. The police officer went to him. What happened? Well, she came up in here trying to fight my mama's friend, and she was helping me with my children because she saw me struggling on the road with my children, and she saw I needed help, and so that's why she was in my truck, and that's why she was in my house. Then he got to me. Well, I started from way back when the lights got cut off, and when I had to go file child support, and then when he stopped sending the money home, and then how I had to give birth to my son out in the hospital because my son came out and told me about the story about how he left them in the truck while these fools slept in the house, and how I ended up giving birth to my son early. So then the police officer, she kept, I want to press charges. I want to press charges. He was so disgusted with them because they could have taken me to jail because, of course, he said this box cutter could have got you shot when we came in here. He turned and told her, ma'am, if you want to press charges, go to 201 Poplar first thing Monday morning and press charges. He turned to him and said, man, I'm not even speaking as an officer right now. I am speaking as a husband. If your wife didn't say this woman could be in her home, you had no business bringing this woman into your home. You had no right to do that. Then he turned to me and said, don't ask questions that you don't want the answers to.
Are we lost? Are we not? Are we real? Are we turning to dust? Do you feel what I feel? Have we changed so damn much? Can we heal? You're not saying a word. Oh, it feels so unreal. We lost all ambition for worldly acclaim. With us, nothing moves forward. It just stays the same. Think you know the answer, but you're playing a game. Thought we stayed together, but you don't feel the same.